We will now recap on waste reduction, measuring and monitoring processes. Many of you will have already attended training or certainly be familiar with processes that aim to reduce food waste. The stages you see here are standard steps presented throughout many tools and resources aimed at hotels. Namely, here you're seeing the resource Fighting Food Waste in Hotels. This is a manual produced by Hotel Kitchen. And actually, they've got a very useful website there at hotelkitchen.org, which is basically an online toolkit. Some of it is as accessible free of charge. So looking at the processes here, as I said, these are very common and you are most likely already very familiar with. So today, what we aim to do is just to recap on this process and share some further keys that have or key practices that have worked really well for other hotels. So starting with staff engagement, waste separation and management, which then informs SMART goals and action steps, followed by communication with customers and an ongoing cycle of review. So we will firstly look at staff engagement. Engaging staff with food waste is obviously very, very critical. They need to be fully on board in order for the measures to have the most impact. And often staff can be resistant to change for many, many different reasons. So let's have a look at these. In terms of food waste, some of the common barriers include thinking that guests expect to see an abundant food supply and not understanding that actually guests are increasingly concerned about the amount of food being wasted. And this really has shifted, particularly with more awareness during the pandemic that has been taking place over recent years. There's a real change in mindset in terms of abundance equaling quality. That is no longer the case. And really, abundance is about what you need, not excess. Secondly, there is a perception that changing the usual way of doing things will result in more work, more time taken to complete tasks, and more effort overall. Also, when establishing food waste monitoring systems, staff can sometimes feel that they are personally being monitored, when actually it is just part of the process of understanding where waste is being created in the business and how to address it most effectively. So now we'll look at some of the innovative ways in which hotels have managed to engage staff. And the key here is really starting with them. We've seen this in many different case studies, not just in the one presented in this Hotel Kitchen report, but also in hotels in St. Lucia. We know that actually engaging staff with their own situation, getting them to engage with waste or resource efficiency in their homes, actually then translates really well back into the business. So in one case study, a hotel started their food waste reduction journey by actually engaging staff with their own dining habits. So the hotel removed trays in the staff canteen and immediately saw reductions in food being wasted. They also held a clean plate photo competition where staff would post pictures of their own clean plates. This is a really great way to raise awareness and also experience for themselves how proactive food waste management actually feels. So they will feel that themselves so that they can really understand what it would be like for a customer. Okay, moving on to separation. So food waste needs to be diverted from the rest of your waste streams. So it's important to dedicate specific areas and containers for food waste. This kind of separation makes it then possible to measure the waste and ultimately allows for intentional and informed decisions about what happens to the food. And actually, it's the most important aspect to reducing food waste. Without separating it into streams, you cannot understand the drivers, and therefore if you don't understand the drivers you don't know how best to address them and adjust them. And it doesn't have to be a complex system. It can be as simple as 4 different vessels, one to collect waste from preparation, one from spoilage that's been left too long, gone out of date, one for plate waste, so that's left on the actual plate of the diners, and one for other. So it can be as simple as just having 4 different containers and diverting the waste properly so that you can then understand the key drivers. And here, just to illustrate that point again, are some examples of tools and approaches used in the UK. And these are freely accessible online, and these can support you to reduce food waste. This is actually from a new campaign called Guardians of Grub. Grub, if you're not sure what that actually means, is a slang term for food. It's very UK terminology there. But WRAP, I'm sure you are already familiar with their work. They are a project partner for this project and have a really extensive wealth of experience and resources available for you to use. And this example here is a toolkit, very simple to use, which helps a business to take the following 3 steps. So step 1, measure. Step 2, make an action plan. Step 3, keep it going and monitor. So if you wanted to get started, this is a really easy toolkit to pick up and start using straight away. And then once you have measured and understood where those waste drivers, what those waste drivers are, you can then move forward to create smart action goals. So to do that, you need to understand where you are generating the most waste, then take action that's going to reduce the amount of food that's thrown away. And there are lots of practical tools and tips contained within that toolkit. And ultimately, your business will save money if you are reducing food waste. And now we will spend a few moments just rethinking the buffet service, and in particular the waste, as we've already discussed at length that this is a key area where food is wasted. So it's really important to communicate with customers by explaining how you are focused on quality and variety rather than excess. So this goes back to this change in mindset now, where abundance doesn't mean quality in the eyes of tourists, and actually it's about seeing that quality is more about variety and making sure that it's good quality ingredients and that it has a story that's intertwined with the culture, the heritage of the destination, rather than a whole mountain of food that's been used there to create this sense of abundance. So another way to do this is to shrink serving trays with demand so that vessels still look full but are smaller. Okay, we understand that you don't want to have big empty spaces in a buffet, so therefore it's important to adapt the vessels that you're actually using according to demand. Another approach is to pre-portion servings onto plates so that customers are not over-serving themselves. They can always take more than one if they wish, but will do so consciously. And creating displays in a way that do not require excessive volumes. So again, we understand this idea of presenting food to create a nice, enticing display, but actually it's about being smart with this. Can you create vertical displays? Can you use smaller vessels? And really importantly, when it comes to fruit, again, to reduce that spoilage, is to display whole foods rather than slicing. And actually, this is a much more engaging way for your customers to understand where their food has come from. So there might be, a real opportunity to tell a story about food that's not common to the tourists that are visiting you. So whole fruits tell the story, and that is going to be way better than an oversupply of chopped fruit. And finally, we return to the theme of plant-rich foods. So here are some recommendations on how to influence diners to select plant-rich dishes over meat-based dishes. And this is taken from the resource shown here on the slide, the playbook from the World Resource Institute. And there's lots of really practical tools and tips in here. And we recommend that you spend some time to really look at these and implement those steps that you think would be a good place to start, or depending where you are on your journey to implement. So this tool sets out the 5P framework. So the 5 key areas where you can take action to promote plant-rich dishes. So firstly, this is returning back to people. So your staff engagement, really getting them on board. Product, so really modifying the offering, the food offerings itself. Placement, so how you go about promoting and displaying those plant-rich dishes. So that does require action on food displays, as we've just looked at. And the presentation, okay, that's linked. And also how you then encourage guests to opt for these dishes. So using marketing strategies in your communication as well. So as I said, there are many practical actions that can be taken forward to design, place and promote plant-rich dishes. And we recommend that you access a copy of this playbook. A link will be shared with you at the end of the training. But in short, here are some of the key concepts. So with product, again, this goes back to reducing the amount of meat in a dish and increasing the amount of plants, really then getting your chefs on board with creating really tasty and engaging textures with plant food. Perhaps you might consider introducing one plant-rich day per week where all of the dishes on that day are plant-rich only, and really think about the appearance of those plant-rich dishes, making them as appealing as popular meat dishes. Placement, again, so this is about making self-service displays really engaging and increase the amount of display allocation to those plant-rich dishes. And then, you know, in terms of the menus, looking at the language, emphasizing the positive aspects of plant-rich dishes. This again goes back to the health, as well as the environment, the local supply chains, seasonality. There are so many things that you can identify based on the first part of this workshop that you can really pull through into that communication as well. So as well as all of those actions that I've just described, on top of that, you can also create other promotional activities. So for example, offering diners free samples or taste testing events for plant-rich dishes. You can do some publicity around the environmental benefits, or it could be highlighting local suppliers. You can run cross-product promotions, so pairing plant-rich dishes with drinks specials as well. And one strategy that you might like to consider is allowing diners to add meat to their plant-rich dishes on request. And then finally, going back to people, so it's really, really important to make sure that your chefs and your staff are really engaged and knowledgeable about the health and the environmental benefits, as well as the benefits to the business, of course, of serving more plant-rich dishes. And it is important that they get trained on how to prepare food as well, so that they really are making sure that the texture and the flavour is optimised. And of course, you can create reward and incentive schemes for chefs and food preparation as well. and make sure that your front of house staff and your waiting staff are really confident in talking to guests and promoting plant-rich dishes. So that concludes this part of the workshop. And so to conclude this workshop, in part one, we looked at the 3 gaps in sustainable food production and consumption. So that was looking at how we can continue to feed a growing population, given the planetary constraints are already being exceeded. And we looked at the GHG and land use gaps as well. We also, in part one, looked at the planet-based food selection and assessment criteria, whereby you took a holistic view of the many different dimensions to consider when making your purchasing decisions around food items. And then in part two, you have recapped on food waste. We have shown you some simple processes and tools that you can implement immediately to support your staff and engage them with food waste, as well as actually implement better processes for monitoring and reducing that waste. And then finally, we have given you guidance on how to guide diners to plant-rich dishes. So we hope that that has been useful, and you will now be provided with tools and resources to continue with your journey. Thank you for your time and participation today.